And now I'd like to introduce a special guest, Mark Halawa, who's here to share with us an inspiring personal story. So I'd like to invite him on stage. Mark.
Good day, everyone. My name is Mark Halawa, or Muntasser Halawa. I was born and raised in Kuwait to a secular Muslim family. My father was a successful engineer, born in the ancient city of Bet-She'an in 1945, during the brief period known as the British Mandate of Palestine after the defeat of the Ottoman Caliphate. My mom, a full-time housewife, was born in the mid-1950s in the biblical city of Shechem, where Jacob drew water for Rachel and buried his son Joseph. Later, the city's name changed to Neapolis after it was conquered by the Romans. The name was then Arabized by the future inhabitants who could not pronounce the letter P and called it Nablus instead of Neapolis. But before learning about this history, or about my parents' birthplaces, I was a young boy who grew up in Kuwait, or Kuwait City, in the 80s, exposed to old media. So what's the difference between old media and new media? I was exposed to old media, meaning we had no choices given to the type of TV or media that we viewed. We had 2 TV channels, that's it. 2 TV channels that indoctrinated us with the traditional Islamic nationalistic viewpoint. Jews were the bad guys, together with the Christian supporters who were depicted as misguided infidels. My siblings and I frequently enjoyed American TV. We spoke English. We enjoyed American TV programs on the English Channel. Our favorite included The Cosby Show and Knight Rider. But when violence erupted in the Middle East, namely in Israel, my father would interrupt our TV programming, or our evening TV time, to watch the news on Channel 1. The news anchor, with the same haircut, the same mustache, and the same monotonous tone, would appear reading the news like this. Good evening. Today on the news, a Palestinian was murdered by Zionist bullets. In other news, Manchester United beat Liverpool 3-0. After my dad had heard his headlines, we'd switch back to Channel 2 to continue watching David Hasselhoff and his talking car Kit deliver justice against the bad guys. But in the back of my head, I always wondered. It disturbed me why someone was killed. Was he throwing a Molotov cocktail? A grenade? Or trying to stab someone? Did he have a gun? The next morning, our teachers would turn our classroom into an incitement fest against the Jews and the West. This would continue for days. And when there was really bad news, I knew that our teachers won't be asking for homework that day. Instead, they'll surely want to share their own expanded vision of the news. One day, our beautiful Egyptian teacher, I think I had a crush on her, our math teacher walks into the classroom, and instead of quizzing us about the multiplication table, she goes, if one bomb could kill 5 Jews, how many Jews could you kill with 7 bombs? My Arabic teacher, who happened to be from Syria, once pointed the classroom's attention to a map of the Middle East and said, look how the West planted those impure Jews in the heart of the Arab world, right between the Middle East and North Africa, so an Islamic caliphate could never be put together again. I looked, and hey, Israel was right between the Asian and African sides of the Middle East. This made perfect sense to me. In Islamic education class, we learned 3 types of jihad. 3 types of jihad, or struggle in English. The first is armed struggle, as in fighting the enemies by the sword. The second type is economic struggle, where if one cannot fight, he could fund fighters or inflict economic harm upon the enemy. The third type was struggle by the heart. If you could not fulfill the armed economic struggle or jihad, then you pray for the well-being of jihadists and you pray against the enemies. My classmates and I looked at each other in wonder. Which type of struggle would be our individual destiny? At our Palestinian Boy Scout troop in Kuwait, we were made to recite articles of the PLO Charter, calling for armed struggle and economic struggle to destroy the Jewish state. 9 times the word struggle appeared in its 33 articles published in 1968. 6 years later, by the way, in 1974, Yasser Arafat spoke right here at the podium of the General Assembly. In the late 1990s, my family and I immigrated to Canada, leaving the troubled Middle East behind. While studying at university, it was revealed to me by a professor that by Jewish law, I am considered a Jew through my Jewish maternal grandmother who married my Muslim grandfather, Muhammad al-Masri, who is from Shechem or Nablus, like we say it. With a shock, I realized I was my number one enemy. Alcohol does not wash that down. Ladies and gentlemen, I was brainwashed and robbed of my childhood. Along with tens of millions of Arab children in the Middle East, we were taught to hate. At university in Canada, I started noticing that student groups against Israel were not Arab. Actually, they had no connection to the Middle East. And they were trying hard to sell the idea that Israel is an illegitimate apartheid country and called for economic boycott against Israeli products. This struck me as an absolute echo of the jihad that I witnessed growing up. Nothing changed. It's just dressed up in a different political language. So my curiosity was boundless. I traveled to Poland to learn about the Holocaust, which I had never heard about in school in Kuwait. My heart was torn to pieces as I learned about the atrocities committed against the Jewish people during World War II, just because they were Jewish. I realized I, too, would have been sent to a death camp since my grandmother was Jewish. After Poland, I flew on to Israel to see it for myself. I saw people of all backgrounds, Arabs and Jews, living together in peace. I especially noticed that Arabs in Israel were happy and proud, running businesses, enjoying social freedoms and economic opportunities. They were full citizens. I came across Arab police officers, doctors, chefs, store owners, and even members of the Knesset. I fell in love with the Middle East again. Years later, I decided to move to Israel, and I got married in its capital, Jerusalem, where I now live. But after some time, the Palestinian Authority started inciting teenagers to stab innocent Israeli bystanders and ram cars into bus stops with women and babies. This is the armed struggle, or the jihad, I learned about as a kid. It was horrible then and equally unspeakable today. There's one word for this: terrorism. Out of curiosity, I wanted to see how Arabic media reported these terrorist attacks today. I turned into Al Jazeera, only to hear the same old news line: a Palestinian was martyred by Zionist bullets. I was devastated, so I founded the Halawa initiative, and I took on to social media to explain in Arabic the actual events that took place not so far from my home. Close to 1 million hits later, the response was encouraging. This on 3 videos. I got almost 1 million hits with partnership with great organizations such as Stand With Us. I noticed that Arab youth wanted to know the truth. The people of the Middle East today are avid consumers of the new media and the internet. The truth can no longer be disguised or disguised by calls for armed jihad or economic jihad. Today, we need a new form of struggle, a new media for truth and peace, since the alternative brought only misfortune. The world today is a global village where everyone is wired in a single economy. And from Casablanca to Kuwait, people in the Middle East acknowledge that. Some countries in the Middle East recently disbanded their notorious religious police after a string of social media posts documenting their abuse of women. Kuwait just licensed a liberal political movement vowing to confront extremism and political Islam, corruption, instead promoting democracy and the freedom of religious practice, rejecting attacks on sects and religions in textbooks and media. This is huge. Just over a year, the United Arab Emirates just passed an anti-discrimination law, acknowledging Judaism along with Christianity and Islam as official religions, and of course every other religion, and they allowed to open houses of worship. They did that in accordance with the teaching of the Quran, and I'm going to quote something from my Arab friends who could understand this and translate it afterwards. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. O mankind, we have created you from male and female and made you into nations and tribes so you may understand and know one another. Misguided people call for boycott and sanctions. I call for building, developing, and supporting ties with one of the world's leaders in innovation, my home today, the State of Israel.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, Mr. Halawa, for these remarks.